Welcome. I'm Leslie Canham.
I'm Mary Gavoni.
I'm Linda Harvey.
I'm Olivia Wan, and together we are the Compliance Divas.
Welcome to the Compliance Divas podcast. We have a timely topic to discuss today that will affect your computer operating systems in your practice. Some of you may have heard that the Windows 10 operating system that many of you use for running your practice management software is ending on October 14th of 2025. And we're going to discuss what exactly that means for dental practices and, more importantly, what it means in terms of HIPAA compliance. Because the HIPAA security rules state that you need to be utilizing all of the latest updates to security patches and provisions within any software that you use to help protect your patients' protected health information. And one of the key issues that happens with Windows updates and other operating system updates is security patches, that they find holes, they find vulnerabilities, and they issue a software patch to close that gap, if you will, in the software. So what does this mean in terms of technical support and updates? Well, the death, as it's reported on the internet, of Windows 10 is very similar to what we experienced with Windows 7. The technical support ends. You can no longer call or get online with Microsoft and get technical support if something goes wrong. And you will no longer get security updates on a regular basis for Windows 10. Windows 10 will continue to run after October 14th, but it may become over time a very unsecure operating system because you're not getting those security updates. So if you've not already met with or spoken to the IT professionals that support your practice, and this is actually beyond the technical support people for your software, your practice management software, the IT company that should be monitoring security and your network and all of those types of things. If you haven't met with them yet about this, you need to, because you've only got about 3 weeks until the end of the Windows 10 support. So, Linda, let's talk about whether dental practices have to switch. Absolutely, because Windows 10 will keep working. And what are some other things that practices need to know?
That's a good question, Mary, because both Diva Olivia and I were talking about that, and I know she couldn't be with us today, so we want to be sure we address this. So offices may find themselves in a situation now where they're investing in a lot of new equipment, servers, workstations, and it's becoming a very costly investment for them. So there's several things happening. One is you want to first know whether your equipment, your technology, can support Windows 11. And if it can't, then obviously you need to upgrade your server and your computers. And in some cases, Mary, the IT partners have been recommending what Windows is going to be offering as I'm going to call it a quick fix, which is not really a fix, it's more of a patch, is called the Extended Security Updates, ESU. And they're offering, that does offer some patches and whatnot until Windows, has reached its end of life, which is really actually October 14th. And so you can still extend that for maybe even up to a year. But the thing they need to realize that Windows is probably not telling them, because there's not direct communication, and maybe the IT professional doesn't know that using Windows extended security updates doesn't make your system HIPAA compliant. And that's the weak area, because if you end up with a breach or ransomware, some issue like that happens, and when you do your forensics and it becomes known that you had a vulnerability, you didn't have an update that you were supposed to implement, if it's a reportable breach, Mary, which more than likely it would be with those type of things, then you're going to find yourself, on the radar with the Office of Civil Rights with them asking questions. So what is missing is the comprehensive security updates that are required for the security rule, which is being able to access controls and the audit trails that are conducted at like the server level, the data encryption issues, doesn't help you. It's going to be identified on your risk assessments that it's not compliant because we're putting it down, whether our clients have implemented that or not for their security risk assessment this year. And then the physical safeguards on top of that. So it's important to talk to your IT professional about this. And Mary, I'd like to draw the distinction between the different levels of IT support that dental practices use across the country. You and I both have experienced this in our other divas, is that sometimes they use an individual who they've always used this person for their practice. This person knows IT really well. Maybe they're a friend, a neighbor, a college student in their practice, but they don't know the laws. They don't know the laws, and they're only serving in the capacity of a you break, I fix. And there are some professional companies that are only offering services at that level. They don't have the capability to do the full remote management monitoring that's required under the security rule, and they don't have the ability to push automatic updates to all their clients and other key features that a managed services provider could provide to a dental practice. And Mary, when offices are looking at different levels of security, I find that they typically want to kind of gravitate to the lower end of the scale, right? Cheaper prices, it's more affordable, quote unquote. But when they do that, they're peeling off layers of security. So I'd like to use an analogy here, Mary. I know you've lived in these states with winter weather in Michigan and everything, and thankfully I'm in Florida, but when I go, I have layers of clothes to stay warm. And so you don't go to the cold weather and not have all your layers of clothes on. So you don't do business on the internet and have your patient data being transmitted to different clearinghouses and accessed by third-party billing companies or remote employees without having the proper layers of security in place. So you just can't afford not to do so. So I would also recommend that if your IT company hasn't talked to you about phasing this in, that's something I would go back and revisit. Why didn't they tell you this was coming? Why didn't you have a plan in place? So maybe that person or company is not in tune to all these changes. So be mindful of that because you should have a list of all your asset technologies, when you purchase them, where they're located, for example, front desk 1, front desk 2, doctor office 1, all the different areas, and then what's the end of life on those. So now you can begin to make a better plan for budgeting in your practice. That's so very important. So if you have to purchase the extended service updates, please do so for the shortest amount of time that you can and make sure that you have a plan with your IT partner of phasing in the rest of the computer updates so you don't miss out on any security that you need. Mary, such an important topic. Thanks for bringing this up today.
You bet. And up to now, my mindset has been looking at, if we had to replace equipment, thinking maybe about workstations, if they have enough memory to handle Windows 11. But if you are a server-based practice or you're using server-based software, you may, as you said, Linda, need to update that server as well, which can be, shall we say, a little spendy to do that. And you need to be careful working with those IT professionals, as you said, making sure that even with your existing server, if you don't need to update it, what is the end of life date for your Windows Server software? Because there's two layers of this. There's the server software that runs the server and helps to distribute your network around the office, and then the operating system for all of the programs that you're using. So it's very complex. And I see more and more practices now opting to go to a cloud-based practice management software program so they don't have that expense of the server and they get real-time, all-time backup information on there. So that's something else to consider. Yes, Linda.
So right, let's tease out that point about whether they need a server or not, because I think from what I've come across, yes, when you've got have a cloud-based program, your backups are all through that program for your practice management system. But there's still data that they're generating within the practice, as we know, and they have their server for their imaging and whatnot. So those there's still some things that they need to keep up with, because I think sometimes, and I bet you've heard the same thing, Mary, sometimes some of the sales reps for the cloud-based programs aren't in tune with what the IT needs are of the practice afterwards. And they might just say, well, you don't need the server anymore. and they aren't really only referencing it for the practice management system. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing up that distinction because, yes, the other programs are not necessarily cloud-based. And an interesting thing, when you mentioned about some of the peripheral things, what we found during COVID was that there were huge security vulnerabilities in imaging devices and scanners and all types of equipment that we didn't realize. It wasn't just the security for the workstations. What about that iTero scanner? What about your CBCT? That we need to make sure we have appropriate security on those because they are connected to a server and then they become vulnerable to hackers. And what we're seeing more and more is just an exponential increase in the number of hacking and ransomware events in healthcare, and dentistry has been viewed for a while as sort of the low-hanging fruit in that we don't always have the most sophisticated security like a large medical clinic or a hospital facility. So, hey, let's go here. We can get a lot of patient information that we can sell then on the dark web. So thank you for bringing up that very important description. You can't get rid of the server altogether, but you don't necessarily then need maybe as robust of a server if you're using cloud-based practice management, but it really depends on what else you're using. So one of the questions I'm sure our listeners have is, well, if we switch to Windows 11, what about all of our practice management software and our apps? This is a situation where I believe, and weigh in, please, Linda, if you agree or disagree, that these companies that make the practice management or that sell the practice management software and other platforms have been operating in Windows 11 or preparing for this for a very long time. Windows 11's been available for a couple of years now. So in most cases, they are compatible with Windows 11, but you may want to just have a checklist and make sure that everything is Windows 11 compatible if you're going to make the switch. And make sure that either through your IT company or internally in your practice, you are doing those regular Windows updates. So a lot of people will turn Windows updates off. And back in the day, I remember when we switched to Windows XP, which many people don't even remember at this point, but Windows XP would update all the time, and that would mean nothing would work. Your printers wouldn't work. You have to go back and reinstall printers and do all kinds of things. And you don't want that kind of a disruption in a dental practice when you're trying to use your equipment and your scanners and your milling machines and all that. But we haven't seen that with Windows 11. I think Microsoft learned some expensive lessons over that time of Windows XP. So I wouldn't be afraid of that, but remember that the updates that you get that are regular are typically security updates, and those are the most important things for you to have in your practice. So Linda, final thoughts.
Yes, thank you, Mary. So I want to just piggyback of what you just said about those security updates, because if you don't accept them and have them updating on a regular basis, the hackers and the bad guys, the bad actors, they know that. They know where all the weaknesses are. So they know where to look. So if you forget or you don't have it turned on or your IT partner doesn't have it turned on for automatic updates, then you're, again, a sitting duck because of some little vulnerability. And all it takes is, like, to use an analogy, your home, all it takes is one unlocked window, one unlocked door, and somebody can get into your practice. So thanks for bringing up those good points.
Thank you, Linda. And here's a little tease for a future podcast. We're going to have an IT expert on with us in a couple of weeks to discuss Microsoft's move away from passwords and going to pass keys and what that means for all of us. That one has me kind of shaking in my boots because that's going to be a big change. So listen and watch for announcements on that future podcast. Well, thank you for joining us today. The Compliance Divas bring clarity and security to compliance by navigating the regulatory world to keep you on course. You can subscribe to the Compliance Divas podcast through your favorite podcast app. And you can also subscribe through our website, thecompliancedivas.com. Resources that we mentioned today and even more will be included in the show notes on your podcast app, so you can download them from there. If you have questions, you can submit them to us by email at support@thecompliancedivas.com. And take a second when you finish listening to the podcast and scroll down and leave us some comments, leave us feedback, and please give us a review. Thanks for listening. See you next time.